Host Rob, and we are finally going to revisit the Fantasy Battle series. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for this, and I'm excited to get back into it. This kind of stuff takes a lot of work, and especially this particular battle. This one, we're going to do Godzilla versus Cthulhu. Okay guys, welcome back. So, this was a very difficult match because there is not a lot of information on Cthulhu. H.P. Lovecraft obviously wrote the story back in the 1920s, and when he wrote the story, he wrote it in a first-person perspective where different characters were encountering either statues or lore of the actual creature, but not necessarily encountering the creature himself. So this required a lot of research on my part, a lot of adjustments, and some of my own imagination. I really had to try and come up with Cthulhu that would, I guess, honor what Cthulhu is supposed to be, but also at the same time making this match as very interesting as possible. So we're going to get into this. Now, in terms of Godzilla, we've done the tail of the tape for Godzilla already. We know that Godzilla his biggest power is his long-range atomic breath, so I am sticking with that in the simulator. Also, back in the match versus Voltron, I had that his mid-range attack would be his tail swipe. I am also keeping that in his arsenal. And finally, his close-range attack would be his bite, his clawing, his slashing. These are standard Godzilla attacks. These attacks I am not changing. So those are going to be his three primary attacks. Also, when taking into consideration his armor, we are going to consider his regeneration ability. This is what allows Godzilla to take all those barrages of missiles and just keep going like there's nothing. And also his strength. Godzilla is a very large creature, he's very powerful, and he uses that to his advantage. In terms of size, this one we're going to go with the Final Wars size Godzilla, which was, according to the statistics I see, 100 meters. The reason we're going this route is because Cthulhu has been described to be hundreds of meters large. In reality, he's actually sometimes described to be even larger than Godzilla. However, in the interest of fairness, we're going to make both creatures 100 meters. Now, in terms of Cthulhu, as I said, this was a very, very, very difficult thing, but I think I've nailed it. And once again, just to give you guys a brief touch on what the simulator is, basically it has four categories. It has armor, long-range attack, mid-range attack, short-range attack. That's it. There's really no room for special abilities, but what I do is, for example, when I take into account Godzilla's regeneration, because there's no particular category for his regenerative abilities, I up his defense against every category. Now, the armor has coverage, which is basically how much ground they can cover, the area around them, how much of their own self they can defend. And then there is a speed category in the armor. This is how fast a creature moves. So in other words, they can dodge an attack. And then the defense against category, I have crushing, slashing, and piercing. And those are the basic defensive categories. Now, for the long range, you have and this is to explain to you guys how the attacks work. Every range, long range, mid range, and short range, has certain categories. Now, the categories are as follows, and they all have the same categories, so I'm just going to explain one, and that gets implemented into the other ones as well. You have the weapon type, which obviously for long range it's breath, in Godzilla's case. You have the reach, and this is based on yards. Now, with Godzilla's breath, I always have it ranged at the length of 4 football fields, so that's 400 yards. In terms of speed, how fast he can actually shoot it, I give him 50 out of 100% because sometimes he likes to charge up, so I got to be fair there. What kind of weapon type it is, which is a projectile. So, and those are basically the categories in each range attack. So for example, mid-range, obviously I wouldn't have his reach being 400 yards. We've narrowed it down to his tail attack. So, estimating that his tail is probably 30 meters. So you're gonna go maybe 250 yards on that one, maybe a little bit less, but that's just to give you an idea, and sometimes these have to be rough estimates because the monster sizes change, the monster attributes change, especially in terms of Godzilla. I try to keep everything the same, but in this case, I'm changing his height, so I have to alter the yardage. So that's how the simulator works. And then you put all these stats in. If I find stats online, I will use them, but for the most part, I have to kind of play with the numbers and make a guesstimate based on movies. Now with Cthulhu, and we're going to talk about Cthulhu now and how we broke him down. Cthulhu is a little bit different because Cthulhu has magical powers which this simulator does not take into account. Now I can get creative and put certain things in there and amp up some of the strength, and that'll give it maybe the effect that I want. So for example, since I don't really know what kind of attacks Cthulhu has, his long range attack, I gave him a telekinesis throw. Basically kind of like the dark side when they grab items and toss them all over the place. So in this case, he would be tossing buildings or a series of cars at Godzilla. Some of these items can be lethal, so that is his long-range attack. He's going to use his mind power to throw items at Godzilla. His mid-range attack is going to be a tentacle life draw, and to give the life draw effect, I had to amp up the strength because I also had to match it against Godzilla's regenerative abilities, which also makes the end result very interesting, excuse me. And then, for short range, I gave him basically basic melee attacks and a barrage of tentacle attacks. Now, because he has a barrage of tentacle attacks, he gets a bonus in the speed category over Godzilla in that particular category because his tentacles, in my opinion, are going to far exceed Godzilla's speed in swiping and biting. So that's where he has the advantage. So, Cthulhu. Now we know his attacks, we know his range. Now, Cthulhu is a very interesting monster because while he has the size and the scale of a kaiju, he also has the powers of a magician, basically. He's got extreme control of mind powers, so to speak. Humans look at him and they completely go insane. He has a knack for communicating with people who are either insane or extremely creative. People with rational minds or mundane thoughts can basically fend his mental attacks off. But the thing of it is that Cthulhu has never actually surfaced, according to H.P. Lovecraft's story. There's going to be a time and place where he's going to return and rule the earth. But the sheer sight of Cthulhu will basically make people go crazy. Now, in the case of him versus Godzilla, these are effects that I can't take into account, because Godzilla is a force of nature. If he sees another monster, he's not going to be scared. If another monster tries to enter his mind and not necessarily control him, but influence him, as I've read about Cthulhu, I don't think that's going to work either. Now, some people can argue that because Godzilla's been mind-controlled before by aliens, that Cthulhu should be able to take over his mind. Well, to be quite honest, if you want to stick with the origin of Godzilla, which is what I try to do here, Godzilla is a force of nature. When you talk about force of nature, you're talking about like a tornado or a hurricane. These things cannot be manipulated. You just have to let them pass. And in the interest of fairness, I think we all want a good fight. So I try to make these matches even. So to give Cthulhu mind power over Godzilla, to me, is just, what's the point of even doing the fight? So this is going to be basic, smack them up, smack them down. Let's see who wins. Let's see who loses. We know the tale of the tape between the two monsters. They're both identical in height. I have made them both 100 meters. They both have 3 very solid attacks from long range to short range, and they both have pretty good defense. They're just going to duke it out. We're going to throw it in the simulator. Let's start the countdown.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Well, guys, what can I say? Now, this was a very close match. I actually took this match a little bit further than the last one. Last one, we simulated 15 battles between between Voltron and Godzilla. This time, I simulated 25 battles between Cthulhu and Godzilla wins 13-12. A very close match. I mean, and the thing of it is, we look at the numbers here. Godzilla won in the long-range category. That's where he's dominant. And you know what? This is why I feel like I'm getting it right. That makes perfect sense. That is his strength, his atomic breath. That is what's going to always be the deciding factor in most of his matches. So in long range, he defeats Cthulhu 12-8, which is pretty close because that means that basically Cthulhu might have caught him with a couple of buildings that just either completely penetrated Godzilla's armor or just, you know, gave him blunt force trauma and just knocked him out, or whatever the case may be. But still, in the end of the day, Godzilla's atomic breath was far superior than Cthulhu's telekinesis, and that's very interesting when you consider, you know, picking up buildings or throwing a certain amount of debris or something at Godzilla. But at the same time, telekinesis most of the time is going to be blunt force trauma, something Godzilla can more than handle, especially considering he takes missiles. Now, in the mid-range category, Cthulhu won 3-1, and this gives you an example of how strong his life draw was, because you can draw life from Godzilla, he's just going to regenerate. In this case, Cthulhu being so powerful in that category and some of his magical abilities, he even bypassed that completely. He completely bypassed the regeneration 3 out of 4 times. Godzilla won 1 mid-range attack with his tail, which means he must have caught a good shot on Cthulhu and just knocked the shit out of him. In short range, Godzilla got shut out 1-0, and this makes perfect sense as well, because in short range, in my opinion, Cthulhu is going to be faster because he's got multiple tentacles, which are going to move a lot faster, plus he's got punch and kick abilities, so he's got a bigger flurry of attacks to counter Godzilla's short-range attacks. So this is what made it close, is because even though Godzilla has the atomic breath, Cthulhu had very solid long-range attacks, very solid mid-range attacks, and very solid short-range attacks. It's just that he could not overcome the atomic breath. And that's the deciding factor of this match. And that's why you had a very close match between the two monsters. I hope one day somebody either makes a Cthulhu movie or does some lore that's very canon to Lovecraft. I would love to redo this battle, but I think I made it very fair. I think I made the tape fair. It was a very close battle, which is what I expected. And but once again, the atomic breath is very hard to overcome, and that seems to be the deciding factor this time. So anyway, guys, that's it for this battle. One for the ages. I'd love to see. I'm very interested to see what the comments are going to look like after this. I know there's a lot of Cthulhu fans out there, but you don't mind control of force of nature. This doesn't work that way. But nonetheless, Cthulhu fought very well. It was a very close match, and that's it. So I'll see you for the next one. Next one's going to be Predator versus Terminator, and those are the 2 matches for this one for January. So we got Cthulhu versus Godzilla done, and next one is going to be Alien versus Predator. Predator versus Terminator, and then next month I'm going to follow up with 2 more. I will announce those 2 matches on one of my channel updates in the coming weeks. I'm going to go back to the other video where everybody was making their, or asking for their battles they'd like to see. I'll go back there, revisit, and then I'll pick 2 more for the month of February. And don't worry, guys, once I get better at this and once I get a little bit more crafty at getting stats and looking these creatures up that some of you pick, I'll be able to pump these out a lot faster. But anyway, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next video. Hey guys, welcome to Entertainment Talk Nation. I'm your host Rob, and we are finally going to revisit the Fantasy Battle series. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for this, and I'm excited to get back into it. This kind of stuff takes a lot of work, and especially this particular battle. This one we're going to do Godzilla versus Cthulhu. Okay guys, welcome back. So this was a very difficult match because there is not a lot of information on Cthulhu. H.P. Lovecraft obviously wrote the story back in the 1920s, and when he wrote the story, he wrote it in a first-person perspective where different characters were encountering either statues or lore of the actual creature, but not necessarily encountering the creature himself. So this required a lot of research on my part, a lot of adjustments, and some of my own imagination. I really had to try and come up with Cthulhu that would, I guess, honor what Cthulhu is supposed to be, but also at the same time making this match as very interesting as possible. So we're going to get into this. Now, in terms of Godzilla, we've done the tail of the tape for Godzilla already. We know that Godzilla his biggest power is his long-range atomic breath, so I am sticking with that in the simulator. Also, back in the match versus Voltron, I had that his mid-range attack would be his tail swipe. I am also keeping that in his arsenal. And finally, his close-range attack would be his bite, his clawing, his slashing. These are standard Godzilla attacks. These attacks I'm not changing. So those are going to be his 3 primary